On my 76th birthday, my son Graham slammed his fist against the mahogany dining table and shouted, "Dad, give me your entire pension or pack your suitcase and get out of my house." Have you ever felt your own blood turn cold at the voice of the child you once raised, the same child whose homework you stayed up late correcting, the same boy you once carried on your shoulders through county fairs? That night, I felt my chest tighten more than any heart surgery had ever done to me. My name is Arthur Beckett, a retired mathematics teacher from Denver, Colorado. I taught geometry and calculus for 40 years. I spent my career drilling numbers and patience into young minds, believing discipline and logic would protect them from arrogance. But numbers don't prepare you for betrayal within your own family. I had once lived in a small ranch house in Wyoming with my wife Margaret. She loved lilacs and made the house smell like spring even in February. When she died of lung disease 6 years ago, the house felt like an empty cathedral. Graham came to me then, voice silky but urgent. "Dad, sell the ranch. Help us with the down payment for a bigger place. You'll live with us, you'll never be alone again." I looked at him and saw not just a son, but a man who finally seemed to need me. Against Margaret's last wish, she whispered before her passing, "Don't let them take your house, Arthur. I sold the ranch." Nearly $500,000 in equity went into a $2.5 million villa in Cherry Creek. A 3-story luxury home with marble floors, a wine cellar, and chandeliers sparkling like constellations. The kind of place where Vivian, my daughter-in-law, could host charity luncheons for her wealthy friends. But my price of admission was steep. I was given the smallest guest room on the 3rd floor. A desk tucked between boxes of Graham's old law school books, a single bed pushed against the wall, and a reminder that I was a guest in the house I had paid for. Vivian liked to smile at me with that polished grin of hers, the kind that doesn't warm the eyes. She'd say, "Arthur, breakfast is at 7 sharp. Don't be late, the eggs will get cold." If I came at 7:15, she'd cluck her tongue like I was an unruly schoolboy. Graham, now a senior executive at a bank, was always stiff behind his morning newspaper. Every creak of the floorboards under my arthritic knees seemed to offend him. He never looked at me when I said good morning. He only cared that on the 15th of every month I handed him an envelope, my pension check. That night after his outburst, silence fell heavy. Vivian stared at her diamond bracelet rather than at me. My granddaughter Elise, 19 years old, and the only soul in that villa who treated me as a human being, looked like she was about to cry. "Dad, I'm serious," Graham barked. "Either you play by our rules or you're out. This house costs more than you'll ever understand, and your pension is part of keeping it afloat." I sat there, fork trembling in my hand, heart pounding like a war drum. Was this what my life had become? A man reduced to a number in his own son's budget sheet. I want to ask you who are listening. Where are you hearing my story from today? Please type the name of your city or country in the comments, because I want to see just how far the voice of an old man once silenced at his own table can travel across the world. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the darkened corner of my tiny room. I held Margaret's photograph, her smile softer than moonlight. I remembered how she used to tell me, "Arthur, God never puts us through storms without a purpose. Hold your dignity. Don't let anyone take that from you." And as I whispered a shaky prayer into the silence, I knew one thing: I could not survive much longer as a ghost in my own son's mansion. The morning after my 76th birthday outburst, I woke up at 5:30 out of habit. Decades of teaching had carved discipline into my bones. I shaved, buttoned my only pressed shirt, and stood by the window of my cramped third-floor room. From up there, the villa's manicured backyard stretched like a magazine photo, a fountain humming in the middle stone benches lined neatly, and a stainless steel grill that only ever came alive when Graham had colleagues to impress. It looked perfect. But I had learned that perfection in houses hides cracks in hearts. When I went downstairs, Vivian was already in the kitchen, dressed in silk pajamas that cost more than my monthly pension. She slid a plate in front of me, scrambled eggs and burnt bacon. "You're late, Arthur." Again. The clock showed 7:12. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I'll cook my own. Don't you dare make a mess in my kitchen." She adjusted her diamond earring. "Just eat. And don't forget your blood pressure pills. I found them on the table yesterday." I nodded the words, catching in my throat. My students had once looked at me with respect. Now in my son's house, I was treated like a child. Graham came down, tie already knotted, Rolex catching the sunlight. He didn't say good morning. He only asked, "Did you set aside the pension envelope? The mortgage draft is due." "It's on your desk," I answered. He grunted, flipped open his leather briefcase, and tucked the envelope in like it was nothing more than a receipt. No thanks. Not even eye contact. Do you know that feeling when your very existence is reduced to a transaction? When every breath you take under someone's roof feels like a bill you must pay. That was my breakfast every day. After they left for work, I walked out to the garden. My knees ached on the stone path, but the sunlight felt like a blessing. I remembered my old ranch in Wyoming, my tomatoes, Margaret's lilacs, the creak of our wooden porch swing. I could almost hear her laughter echoing in the wind. That's when the guilt hit me hardest. I had broken her last request. "Don't sell the ranch, Arthur. It's all you'll have left." But I had wanted to believe Graham. I had wanted to feel needed again. I shuffled back inside, pulled down an old leather box from the closet, and flipped through yellowed photographs. Margaret in her wedding dress, Graham at 5 on his first bicycle, Elise as a toddler, with her curls bouncing in the sunlight. Every picture whispered the same question. When did my son stop seeing me as a father and start seeing me as a wallet? By the time Elise came home from her university classes that afternoon, I had nearly convinced myself that maybe I was overreacting. She burst into my room without knocking, carrying a bag of books. "Grandpa," she smiled, hugging me tightly. "I brought you a chess set from the thrift shop near campus." My eyes stung. "You didn't have to spend money on me. It was $5, she laughed. "And I missed playing with you." She was the only one in that mansion who remembered I was still alive. We set up the board nights and bishops worn down by age, and for an hour I forgot that I was just an unwanted guest. After she left, I sat alone again with Margaret's photograph. "I don't know what to do," I whispered. "But I can't keep living like this." I bowed my head and prayed something I hadn't done earnestly in years. "Lord, give me strength. If you kept me alive through that open-heart surgery, then let it be for something more than waiting quietly in the corner of a house I helped pay for. Show me how to reclaim the dignity Margaret wanted me to keep." When I opened my eyes, the chessboard still lay on the table. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of resolve. Maybe this was the beginning of a new game. 2 nights later, I sat at the dinner table in silence, while Graham boasted about his promotion at the bank. Vivian chimed in about her latest shopping trip to Aspen, new handbags, ski jackets, dinners at a 5-star lodge. Their voices clashed like silver cutlery scraping on porcelain. And me, I was invisible. Dad Graham said suddenly, not looking up from his steak. Next week's mortgage is tighter than usual. We'll need your full pension, no deductions. I laid my fork down slowly. Graham, I've given you most of it every month. I need a little left for myself, yourself. He laughed bitterly. Dad, you don't go anywhere, you don't buy anything. What could you possibly need money for? We're drowning here. Elise looked up, horrified. Dad, stop. Grandpa deserves Elise, stay out of this. Graham cut her off sharply. This is grown-up business. But the way he said grown-up business cut me deeper than any insult. Was I not the man who raised him, who put him through college, stayed up late grading papers to pay for his tuition at Stanford? Vivian placed her jeweled hand on Graham's. Arthur, don't make this harder than it is. We all make sacrifices for the family. Yours just happens to be your pension. Sacrifices. That word echoed in my head. Hadn't I sacrificed enough? My ranch, my independence, my pride. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced the small room, Margaret's photo in one hand, Elise's thrift shop chess set in the other. My late wife's voice whispered in my memory, don't let them take everything, Arthur. God gave you life after surgery for a reason, don't waste it being a shadow. At 2 a.m., I made my decision. I pulled my old suitcase from under the bed. Its handle was worn, the zipper stubborn, but it was still strong enough to carry what little I had. 2 shirts, a sweater, a handful of books, Margaret's photograph, and my medication. 76 years of life reduced to one case. As I zipped it closed, a strange calm washed over me. I wasn't terrified. I wasn't even sad. I was angry, yes, but more than that, I was free. At dawn, while the villa still slept, I wheeled the suitcase down the marble staircase. My knees protested, but each step felt lighter than the last. When I reached the front door, Elise's voice startled me. Grandpa, where are you going? She stood there in her pajamas, eyes wide, clutching her textbooks to her chest. I pressed a hand to her cheek. Sweetheart, I can't stay here any longer. This house doesn't see me as family, it sees me as a bank account. Tears filled her eyes. But where will you go? I'll figure it out, I said softly. Don't worry. Focus on your studies. That's what matters. She hugged me tightly, whispering, I love you. I love you too, Elise, I replied, forcing a smile. And I'll see you again. But for now, don't tell your father. This is something I must do. I stepped out into the cold Denver morning, suitcase wheels rattling against the stone driveway. My breath rose in little clouds. The villa loomed behind me, gleaming immaculate and empty of the warmth it promised. I walked down the street, each step fueled by determination. Cars rushed past, strangers hurried to work, but no one noticed the old man leaving behind a palace that was never really his. At the corner, I stopped at a payphone. My hands shook as I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. After 3 rings, a gravelly voice answered. Marcus Delaney speaking. Marcus, it's Arthur. My voice cracked. I need a place to stay. Just for a while. There was a pause, then a chuckle. About damn time you called, old friend. Bring your suitcase. I've got a couch and a bottle of bourbon waiting. For the first time in years, I laughed. Not because life was suddenly easy, but because I realized something vital. I was no longer begging for a seat at someone else's table. I was choosing my own. And that choice, though terrifying, felt like the first real breath of freedom since Margaret died. Marcus Delaney hadn't changed much in the 20 years since I last saw him. When I arrived at his garage on the edge of Denver, suitcase in hand, the sound of classic rock bled out from the open bay doors. The smell of oil and iron filled the cold air. And there he was, short, broad-shouldered, a mop of gray hair sticking out from under a greasy cap, sliding out from beneath a Chevy on a creeper board. "Arthur Beckett," he barked, squinting against the sunlight. "Well, I'll be damned. You brought a suitcase. Don't tell me Graham finally showed his true colors." I lowered the bag beside me and sighed. "He told me to give him my entire pension or get out." Marcus spat into an oil pan, muttered something under his breath, then stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. "I warned you, didn't I, back when you sold that ranch? I said, don't trust a banker's son with hungry eyes. But you never listen. He was my boy," I said softly. "I thought living with him would mean family again." Marcus shook his head. "Arthur, listen to me. Family isn't who you bleed for. It's who bleeds for you. Remember that." He clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder and led me upstairs to a small loft above the garage. 2 rooms, a kitchen that smelled faintly of coffee, and a sagging couch covered in old flannel. It wasn't a villa with marble floors, but it was warm, and it was mine, even if just borrowed. Marcus poured 2 glasses of bourbon, slid one across the table. "So what's the plan?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I can't afford Denver rent. My pension barely stretches as it is." "You forget something," Marcus said, eyes narrowing. "You're still a co-borrower on that palace Graham struts around in. Your name's on that mortgage, which means your signature keeps his whole empire standing." I frowned. "But the payments come straight out of my account. Automatic transfer, then stop it." He grinned, showing a chipped tooth. "Cancel the auto pay. Let Graham sweat for once. You've carried him long enough. Time he remembers the ground he's standing on belongs to you as much as him." The thought jolted me. I had considered it once, late at night, staring at the ceiling, but I'd buried it under guilt and fear. Now Marcus spoke it aloud, like it was the simplest thing in the world. "What if he loses the house?" I asked. Marcus leaned forward. "What if you lose yourself, Arthur? Which is worse. Look, I'm not saying you ruin him. I'm saying you stop feeding a son who treats you like a ledger entry. You want dignity. This is how you take it back." The next morning, we went downtown to the First National Bank of Denver. Marble pillars, glass doors, the kind of place Graham bragged about working with clients from. A young banker with polished shoes led us to his office. "I'd like to cancel the automatic mortgage payment from my account." I told him, my voice steady. The banker raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Beckett, are you sure as co-borrower you're liable if payments aren't made?" "I understand," I said. "But liability doesn't mean servitude. From now on, the payments are Graham's responsibility." He handed me a form. My signature scratched across the paper, and with it, decades of quiet submission began to loosen their grip. As Marcus and I stepped back onto the street, the winter air cut sharp against my cheeks, but I felt taller somehow. Lighter. Marcus slapped my back. "You just put the fear of God into that boy without saying a word. Wait till he finds out." That evening, my phone exploded with messages. Graham's texts swung wildly, first furious, then pleading, then threatening. "Dad, what have you done? Do you realize they'll fine us? We'll lose everything." I typed only one reply. You told me to get out. I'm just following orders. For once, the silence afterward was mine to enjoy. I sat on Marcus's sagging couch with a plate of fried eggs he insisted on cooking. No diamonds on Vivian's wrist, no chandeliers overhead, no marble floors. Just two old men eating together, no one demanding envelopes or ultimatums. And for the first time in years, I whispered into the night, not in fear, but in quiet satisfaction. If you're still following along with me at this point, drop a number 1 in the comments. It helps me know you're here walking through this story with me. 3 days passed before the inevitable knock came. It was a pounding on the garage door downstairs, heavy enough to rattle the window in Marcus's loft. I already knew who it was before I even looked. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and muttered, "Here comes trouble," as the pounding grew louder. I opened the door to find my son standing there, Graham. His suit was wrinkled, his tie loosened, and his face red with the kind of fury only a desperate man carries. "Dad, what the hell have you done?" he shouted before even stepping inside. "Good morning, Graham," I answered calmly, as though he'd simply dropped by for coffee. "Come on in." No need to shout in the street. He stormed into the loft, glancing around at the humble furniture with disgust. "So this is where you're living now, above a garage with him." He jerked his chin toward Marcus, who stood with his arms crossed like a bouncer. "It's warm," I said. "It's honest. And no one here asks for my pension check." Graham slammed his fist on the small kitchen table, making the bourbon glasses clink. "You canceled the auto payment? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "The bank called. We're already late. There are fines. Our credit is sinking." I took a sip of coffee, hands steady. "Yes, I know." That was the point. He blinked at me as though unable to comprehend that his old father could look him in the eye and admit it without trembling. "The point, you're going to ruin us." "No, son," I said quietly. "I'm simply refusing to let you ruin me." His jaw tightened. "You think you're punishing me. You're punishing Mom's memory. You're punishing Elise." "Elise is welcome with me anytime," I interrupted. "She already knows my door is open. And don't you dare use your mother's memory as leverage. She would never have wanted me treated like this." For a moment, silence stretched between us. I saw his eyes flicker, anger, pride, maybe even shame, but then his voice hardened again. "So what now? You just let the house go into foreclosure. Is that your grand plan?" I leaned back, folding my hands on the table. "I don't have a grand plan, Graham. I only have one rule: I won't be used anymore. I signed those papers with you to help you, not to become your wallet. If you want to keep that house, pay for it yourself. You're the bank man, figure it out." Marcus chuckled low, and Graham spun on him. "Stay out of this, old grease monkey," but Marcus didn't flinch. "You don't get to barge into my place and insult me, boy. Your father may be old, but he's got more backbone than you've ever had. At least he knows the difference between respect and exploitation." Graham's face twisted, but he turned back to me. "Dad, please," he said, and for the first time his voice cracked. "Don't do this. I can't carry it all myself." I studied him, my son, the boy I once held on his first fishing trip, the boy who used to tug at my sleeve when he was scared of the dark. Now he was a man begging not for love, but for money. "You made a choice when you gave me that ultimatum," I said, my voice steady. "Give you my pension or get out." Well, I got out, and I won't go back. His shoulders sagged, then stiffened again. "You'll regret this," he spat. "You'll be alone, broke, forgotten. Don't come crawling back when Marcus gets tired of you. I'd rather sleep on a friend's couch with dignity, I answered, than in a mansion where I'm treated like dirt. For a moment, his eyes burned into mine. Then he turned sharply, storming out the door. The sound of his car engine roared, then faded down the street. Marcus whistled. Well, he said that was one hell of a showdown. I sat down, slowly feeling the weight of it all press on my chest. Yet beneath that weight was something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Strength. For the first time, I had stood my ground. That night, long after Graham's angry footsteps had faded from Marcus's garage, I sat alone at the little table upstairs. The bourbon glass was empty, the lamp flickered against peeling wallpaper, and Margaret's photograph leaned beside the chessboard Elise had given me. I knew the confrontation wasn't over. Men like my son didn't walk away, they circled back looking for another angle. Sure enough, the phone began to buzz. First a text, "Dad, we need to talk. You can't just do this." Then another, "Don't throw away your family." And then more sharply, "If you don't fix this, I'll make sure you regret it." I set the phone down. Let him rage. For once, his anger wasn't my chain. Marcus, sensing my heavy thoughts, poured us each another drink. You know he's not done right. He'll be back. Men like Graham only see dollar signs, not fathers. I nodded. That's why I've already taken the next step. What step? Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. I pulled out a folded document from my jacket pocket. The paper was still crisp, the notary's seal shining in the corner. My will, I said. I changed it last week. Everything what's left of my savings, my life insurance, the little pension nest egg, it all goes to Elise. Not Graham. Not Vivian. Just her. Marcus's lips broke into a grin. Well, I'll be damned. You finally put pen to paper. About time, Arthur. I ran my fingers over Margaret's picture. She used to tell me, don't let Graham's hunger swallow everything. Leave something for the ones who love you for you. And Elise. She's the only one who visits me without an agenda, who buys me chessboards from thrift shops instead of demanding envelopes of cash. Marcus raised his glass. To Elise. I clinked mine against his, though my hand trembled. Not from fear this time, but from the weight of the choice. For 76 years, I had tried to be the peacemaker, the provider, the one who smoothed over rough edges. But now finally, I had drawn a line in the sand. Later, when Marcus went downstairs to lock up, I sat by the window looking out over Denver's glowing skyline. The city lights flickered like 1,000 watchful eyes, and I spoke into the night softly, almost like a prayer. Lord, I don't know if I've done right, but I know I couldn't stay in that house one day longer. I couldn't keep funding Graham's pride at the cost of my soul. If I've sinned by being hard, forgive me. But give me courage to finish this path with dignity. The stillness of the room seemed to answer me not with thunder, not with a miracle, but with a calmness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The next morning the storm broke. Graham barged into the loft, face pale, eyes bloodshot. He clutched a copy of my will. No doubt Elise had let something slip. What is this? He demanded, waving the paper like an accusation. You cut me out. You gave everything to Elise. I didn't flinch. Yes, because she's the only one who treats me like family. You can't do this, he shouted. I'm your son, your only child. That money is mine by right. I stood slowly, knees aching, but spirit firm. Respect is a right, Graham. Inheritance is not. His jaw worked furiously, searching for words. Finally, he spat, "You're pathetic. You've lost your mind." "No," I said quietly, looking him dead in the eye. "For the first time in years, I've found it." Marcus appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. Graham shot him a glare, but didn't stay. He stormed out the door, slamming so hard it rattled the window panes. I sank back into the chair, drained but unbroken. For once I had not caved. For once I had stood on the side of truth, even if it meant standing alone. And as I whispered a final prayer under my breath, I knew this wasn't the end of the battle, but it was the beginning of my freedom. After the storm of that confrontation, days passed more quietly than I expected. Graham stopped calling for a while, maybe out of pride, maybe out of panic. But silence after years of constant demands felt like medicine. Then one rainy Saturday morning, I heard a soft knock on the loft door. When I opened it, Elise stood there soaked from the downpour, holding a duffel bag almost bigger than she was. "Grandpa," she said, her voice trembling, "can I stay here for a while?" I stepped aside immediately. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in before you catch pneumonia." She set her bag down and hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs would crack. "I can't do it anymore," she whispered. "I can't listen to Dad and Mom scream at each other every night. I can't stand them blaming you for everything." I stroked her damp hair gently. "You don't owe me explanations. You're safe here." Marcus came up the stairs carrying a tray of coffee and froze when he saw her. Then, with a warm smile that looked strange on his oil-stained face, he said, "Well, looks like we've got a new roommate." "Welcome, kiddo." Elise laughed through her tears. "Thank you, Mr. Delaney." "Marcus," he corrected, handing her a steaming mug. "Around here, we don't do stiff titles." The loft, once just a refuge for a weary old man, now felt alive. Elise made it brighter in ways even the sun couldn't. She decorated her corner with fairy lights, stacked her textbooks neatly on the shelf, and filled the room with the scent of vanilla candles. Suddenly, the place didn't look like a garage attic. It looked like home. At night, she and I played chess on the thrift store board she'd given me months earlier. She beat me more often than I admitted. On Sundays, Marcus grilled burgers downstairs, and the three of us ate at the workbench, laughing louder than the radio. It wasn't luxury. It wasn't marble floors or chandeliers. But it was honest, and it was ours. Meanwhile, the news from Graham's house filtered through Elise. "The bank has already sent foreclosure letters," she told me one evening, her eyes shadowed. "Mom cries all the time. Dad drinks more than ever. They keep saying you ruined them." I swallowed hard. A part of me still ached. No father dreams of watching his child fall apart. But I reminded myself I hadn't ruined them. Their greed had. I had simply stopped feeding it. One night, Elise looked at me over the chessboard. "Grandpa, do you regret it? Walking away, canceling the payments, changing your will." I shook my head slowly. "Regret, no sadness, yes, but not regret. Your father gave me an ultimatum. I chose the path that let me keep my dignity. That's worth more than any villa or pension check." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with something fierce. "I want you to know, you've taught me more these past few weeks than any professor at the university. You've taught me that dignity isn't negotiable. That even when family betrays you, you don't have to betray yourself." Tears welled in my eyes. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're the legacy I care about, Elise. Not the house, not the money. You. Marcus, sitting nearby polishing a wrench, cleared his throat. Well, I'll say this. This loft never looked so lively. Guess I'll have to start charging rent. We all laughed, but in that laughter was something sacred belonging. For years, I thought family was something you were born into. Now I knew the truth. Family was something you chose, something built on respect, not obligation. And in that small loft above an oil-stained garage, I realized I hadn't lost a home. I had found one. By mid-autumn, the leaves in Maplewood turned red and gold, drifting down in lazy spirals. I used to love this season, walking hand in hand with Eleanor along the park paths. Now I sat on the little terrace above Marcus's shop, sipping coffee with Elise beside me reading her textbooks. The world felt steadier. But the news from my son's world grew darker by the week. Elise, who still visited her parents out of duty, returned one Sunday, pale and shaken. They're packing boxes, she told me. The foreclosure notice is final. They have to vacate in 10 days. I set my cup down slowly. 10 days. That house, my house in part, was slipping through their fingers. A wave of emotions crashed inside me, anger, grief, vindication. Dad blames you for everything, she whispered. He says you betrayed him. But Grandpa? I saw him sign papers he didn't even read. I saw him buy a new flat-screen TV last month knowing the mortgage was overdue. I sighed. Pride and greed, Elise. That's a dangerous mix. Your father's fighting shadows of his own making. 2 nights later, Marcus and I were closing the shop when headlights swung across the lot. A sleek BMW, one of those cars people buy on credit just to show the neighbors they've made it, pulled up. Graham stumbled out his tie, loosened eyes, bloodshot. Dad, he shouted across the dark lot. His voice cracked with desperation. Please, please talk to the bank. Reinstate the payments. They'll listen to you. I stepped forward, Marcus by my side like a sentinel. It's too late, Graham. And even if it weren't, I will not sign away my dignity again. He dropped to his knees on the gravel, his expensive shoes scuffing against oil stains. I'll lose everything. I looked down at him. My own son, a man of 46, reduced not by bad luck, but by his own arrogance. No, Graham. You're not losing everything. You're losing a house. But somewhere along the line, you lost something more important, respect. For me, for Elise, for yourself. His shoulders shook, but then bitterness returned like poison. You'll regret this, old man. When you're sick, when you're broke, when Marcus gets tired of you, you'll regret it. Marcus stepped forward, his jaw tight. Get off my lot, Graham. Don't come back here yelling threats at your father. Graham staggered up, glaring at us both, then got back in his BMW and sped away, tires screeching into the night. I stood there, heart pounding, but strangely calm. Once his words would have cut me to the bone. Now they bounced off. A man stripped of truth can only throw empty threats. The next week, Elise officially moved into the loft. She carried her clothes books and that little string of fairy lights that made the corner glow. Watching her set them up, Marcus muttered, "This place looks less like a garage and more like a home every day." And he was right. We ate dinners together. We shared stories. We built a rhythm that felt like family. Not the kind you endure, but the kind you choose. Meanwhile, through whispers in town, I heard that Graham and Vivian had rented a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts. Vivian was working extra shifts, while Graham had taken out yet another high-interest loan to stay afloat. Their luxury had collapsed into survival. One evening, Elise sat across from me at our little wooden table, her voice steady, but her eyes wet. They're miserable, Grandpa. But you know what? They did this to themselves. And I finally see it's not your fault. I reached across, squeezing her hand. Sometimes at least people have to hit rock bottom before they look up. I pray your father does. But I won't sacrifice myself waiting. And that night, as I lay on the couch, Marcus had patched up with new cushions. I realized something. Their fall was not my tragedy. It was their lesson. My rise wasn't built on their collapse. It was built on finally standing tall. For the first time in decades, I wasn't surviving under someone else's roof. I was living under my own terms. Winter came to Maplewood quietly. Frost gathered on the windows of Marcus's shop each morning, and the smell of motor oil mixed with cinnamon candles Elias insisted on lighting in the loft. I would sit at the small table with a wool blanket on my knees, sorting through invoices, sipping hot coffee and thinking, this is not the ending I once imagined, but maybe it's the beginning I needed. Life in the loft wasn't glamorous, but it gave me something I'd been starved of for years: freedom. I could decide what to eat, where to go, how to spend my pension. Simple choices, perhaps. But after so long being treated as an unwanted guest, those choices felt like treasures. Marcus was more than a landlord. He became a brother in arms. We worked side by side, he under the hood of some vintage car, me handling customers and keeping the paperwork straight. He'd clap my shoulder and say, "You keep the wheels turning upstairs and I'll keep 'em turning downstairs." It was the kind of partnership I thought I'd lost when Eleanor passed. And Elise. Elise filled the place with light. Her laughter rang through the loft when she beat me at chess. Her notes covered the table as she studied late into the night, and her determination to build a future reminded me that hope isn't just for the young. Sometimes she'd catch me watching her and ask, "What's on your mind, Grandpa?" And I'd smile and say, "Just grateful. Grateful that you're here." Meanwhile, word about Graham and Vivian spread through town. Their expensive furniture ended up at a pawn shop. Their BMW was repossessed. They were tenants now, arguing in a small apartment where the walls couldn't hide the shouting. Some neighbors pitied them. Others shook their heads. I felt neither triumph nor revenge, only a quiet certainty that I had chosen rightly when I walked away. One evening, Elise came home with news. "They're saying Dad might file for bankruptcy," she said, setting down her bag. "Mom told me he blames you for everything." I stirred my coffee, letting the bitterness rise and then settle. "He can blame me if it helps him sleep. But blame won't rebuild his life." She nodded, her eyes fierce. "You've taught me that dignity doesn't come from money or houses. It comes from standing up for yourself." I'll never forget that. I squeezed her hand. "And I hope one day your father learns it too. But if he doesn't, you must remember you're not bound to repeat his mistakes." That night, as I looked out the frosted window at the quiet street below, I felt something stir deep inside. It wasn't regret. It wasn't sadness. It was strength. The strength of knowing that even at 78 I could still begin again. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't a wallet. I was a man with stories to tell, skills to share, and love still to give. And though I'd lost the house I once shared with Eleanor, I hadn't lost myself. In truth, I had found something richer, a chosen family in Marcus and Elise, and a chance to live the years I had left with dignity intact. The world outside glittered with ice, but inside the loft, the warmth of belonging filled the air. And in that warmth, I realized I was no longer afraid of tomorrow. Spring returned to Maplewood, and with it came the sound of life moving on. The dogwoods bloomed white, the streets filled with children on bicycles, and the smell of barbecues drifted through the neighborhoods. From the loft window above Marcus's shop, I watched it all with fresh eyes. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel like it was closing in on me. It felt open. I had thought my story was ending the night Graham demanded my pension and gave me an ultimatum. I thought I'd be broken, left wandering with a suitcase and nothing else. But life has a way of surprising you when you finally decide to stand tall. Marcus and I had built a rhythm like brothers. The shop ran smoother than ever. Customers came not just for his skill, but for the warmth of the place. Elise kept the books balanced, helped with scheduling, and even painted a cheerful sign that read, Delaney and Walsh. Auto family owned, family trusted. When Marcus unveiled it, he winked at me. Told you this wasn't just a garage, it's a home. And Elise, well, she was thriving. Her grades were strong, her professors recommended her for internships, and she carried herself with a quiet strength that made me proud. One evening, as we sat under the string lights she'd hung across the loft, she said, Grandpa, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: you taught me that family isn't just who shares your blood. It's who stands by you. Her words struck me like sunlight breaking through clouds. All those nights I had sat alone, haunted by mistakes and regrets, I realized they hadn't been wasted. They had led me here to a new chapter where my worth wasn't measured by a pension check, but by the respect in my granddaughter's eyes. As for Graham and Vivian, their story became a cautionary tale in town. The foreclosure went through. They downsized into a modest apartment far from the life they'd flaunted. Graham avoided me, but occasionally through Elise I heard the bitterness in his voice. He still blamed me. Maybe he always would. But I no longer carried the weight of his anger. I had laid that burden down. Because in truth I hadn't ruined his life, I had saved mine. One Sunday afternoon, Dean stopped by, tall, confident, a man, now rather than a boy. He parked his beat-up old motorcycle out front, the same one he'd rebuilt with the part I helped him buy, and walked into the shop with a grin. Grandpa, he said. Hugging me tightly, I got the internship. Full-time this summer. And when I graduate, they're offering me a position. I beamed with pride. I knew you would. You've got the brains and the backbone. He glanced around the loft, the fairy lights, the chessboard on the table, Marcus humming downstairs to the radio. You've built something good here, Grandpa. You've built a life. And in that moment, I knew he was right. The years ahead are not guaranteed. My hands still ache in the morning, my back complains when I climb the stairs, and sometimes I catch myself wishing Eleanor could see all this. But when I look around, at Elise's determination, at Marcus's loyalty, at Dean's bright future, I know she would be proud. I am not invisible anymore. I am not a burden. I am a man who took his life back when the world tried to strip it away. So let me leave you with this. It is never too late to begin again. No matter your age, no matter how heavy the years or how deep the betrayals, you still have the power to say enough. You still have the power to walk out the door with your dignity intact. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Brian's Story and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can keep these family drama stories alive and remind people everywhere that dignity has no age.